Were you surprised by what you saw? Because a lot of people would be horrified and surprised. I mean, what was your response?
Not surprised at all. We're so grateful that, you've been shining a spotlight on this crisis that so many people are unaware of or ignoring. But obviously, at Burma Campaign UK, we are dealing with activists and communities on a daily basis. We hear about reports that your correspondent has reported on. I think your reporting has very powerfully shown the terrible situation that Burma's people are facing, but also the incredible courage and determination that they're showing resisting this brutal military dictatorship. That now needs to be matched by more international action.
Let's talk about the international action, because a key issue, isn't it? The support that China, as we saw in that report there, and Russia and Iran give the junta.
Yeah, China and Russia in particular are key allies of the Burmese military, providing them with funds and weapons. That makes it even more important that the rest of the international community do what they can to cut off funds and weapons to the military. Now, the British government used to lead in terms of imposing sanctions to cut off funds and arms, but those sanctions have really kind of dried up. We've seen no new sanctions in the last 4 months or so. And key sources of revenue to the military, such as Myanmar oil and gas, state-owned banks, are still not sanctioned by the British government. And also, as your reports have been showing, there are daily airstrikes by the military against civilians across the country. But those airstrikes rely on aviation fuel. And Britain can play an important part by imposing sanctions on the supply of aviation fuel. And yet it still hasn't done so. We know that there are 5 British companies that were involved in the supply of aviation fuel. So there are key things that the British government can and should do as a matter of urgency.
Why do you think there is this lack of political will when it comes to what's happening there?
I think we've seen lots of demands from other crises around the world. I think your reporting showed that so many people in Burma are questioning why there's so much help going to Ukraine, deservedly, but so little going to Burma. We've seen in this year that British aid to Burma has been cut by around 50%. And since the coup, a staggering 70%.
I want to jump in there. So
Burma.
50% is 70% broadly aid has been cut since the coup. Is that British government aid or just in general?
British government aid.
Why is that?
I think we've seen aid cuts across the board as the British government.
But it wasn't 70%, was it? FCDO cuts weren't that across the board?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So when the coup happened, there was development aid going to the government, and that was cut. What should have happened was that aid should have been reallocated to people resisting the coup and supporting humanitarian aid to people, but that hasn't happened. I think it's also not just the amount of aid that we need to see increased, but the way it's delivered as well. In these areas, for example, where your reporter was, these are areas that the UN and international aid agencies cannot access. They're not under the control of the military, but there are civil society organisations that can provide aid. So we need to see more British aid going to fund those
that would be difficult.
Civil society.
Would that be easy to reallocate that funding from? I mean, because if you say that, OK, 70% of the aid was cut after the coup because 70%, well, that 70% was going to the government, you can understand why they would cut that. But how easily would it be to reallocate that funding to the people who are resisting the military junta?
It's totally possible. But I think one of the things that the British government, the Foreign Office, needs to do is to cut the red tape and bureaucracy surrounding the giving of aid. These are organisations that are operating in war zones, in conflict zones, and yet they can't access government funding because it's surrounded in so much red tape and bureaucracy, it's impossible for them. So we need to see the British government reassess how they're delivering aid, as well as giving more aid to people who so desperately need it. It's shocking that at a time when people in Burma have never needed more assistance, the British government has been cutting aid to them.
Have you ever seen a situation like the one we're seeing in Stuart's reports?
I haven't. I mean, it is absolutely shocking what people in Burma are having to suffer, and with such little resources and support. So that's why it's wonderful that you are highlighting these issues, but also hopefully it will galvanise. We need to see the British government step up its action.
Because
more pressure to deny.
Because if nothing happens, what's going to happen in Myanmar? More people will die.
Yes, more people will die. But I think what is highlighted in your report also is the determination of people. The military in Burma haven't succeeded in consolidating their coup. They are losing territory. They do not control large parts of the country. And the strength and determination of that resistance is only growing. But we see the military resorting to ever more brutal tactics to try and take control. So people in Burma are doing everything they can to resist this military dictatorship. We need to see that matched by international action.
Do they need to be more galvanised in that resistance, and so that there is someone that, let's say, if you do want to give aid to them, there is a central point or someone that you can speak to about that, as opposed to trying to deal with all these disparate factions within all the counties?
There are plenty of civil society organisations that have the structures in place, and they know how to reach the people that need it most in those areas where no one else can deliver aid to them.
It was very interesting. I was talking to Stuart, and he said that there was a woman who, on her own, was feeding 4,000 people from crowdfunding.
Yeah, it's astonishing. People in Burma, they realise they're not getting that support, but they are doing incredible things to survive. But there are ways that the British government can increase funding to these sort of civil society networks that are keeping people alive and safe.
Do we also need political will at sort of the Security Council level within the United Nations, putting pressure on Russia, on China, on the junta themselves?
Yes, absolutely. We need pressure at every level. There's no one single silver bullet that can solve this crisis. We need to see the international community using every pressure lever available, be that through targeted economic sanctions, through arms embargoes, through international justice.
I'm going to leave it there, Anna, but thank you so much
Thank you.
for talking to us. Anna Roberts here from the Free Burma Campaign.